So for the next keynote session, Transformative Inclusion, Addressing PwD Challenges and Crafting Empowering Workplaces. To do this, I would request Ms. Aarushi Gambhir, PwD Advocate, Enable Education. Can we have a big round of applause for Ms. Aarushi first? Aarushi Gambhir is a disability inclusion strategist, writer, and speaker. She has written extensively around disability in magazines, e-blogs, and social media platforms. She has also worked with various organizations such as Access for Everyone, Soul Up, and Volunteer for India. She is currently leading her own project called Enable Education, which works to create awareness about the needs of students with disabilities. The project is being supported by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Also, she has led diverse cross-sectional teams throughout the course of her career so far. Can we have a huge round of applause for Ms. Aarushi Gambhir?
Good morning, everyone. First of all, a huge thank you to Sonika ma'am and Matali ma'am for the invitation. So let me start by sharing an anecdote, because I have been led as a disabled person, as somebody who's worked with several organizations. I have had the pleasure of being led by some of the best leaders out there, and I've also had the opportunity to lead a very diverse team at my own social entrepreneurship venture, Enable Education. So when I started Enable Education back in January of this year itself, I knew one thing, that this team was going to be cross-cutting. It would have both people with and without disabilities, and that's just how a holistic partnership to create inclusion for children with disabilities would work. 2 months into the initiative, I was a new leader. I was just 22 when I started, and there's a story that we had to get out on our social media platform. We are a social media based initiative. At that point, we were very heavily dependent on social media for our work. And the person that I had allotted this particular task to was one of my best writers in the team. And she had partial hearing and partial speech impairment. Now, what she did not feel comfortable disclosing to me, because I hired her through social media, through LinkedIn, was the fact that she also had ADHD. And so which meant that for her to execute this story, even though she's a literature graduate, one of my best writers, was a task. And she just calls me at 8 o'clock the day before the story is out, saying, I forgot. And I've done the story, but it's really not in the kind of template that we want for our media platform. I said, okay, let me work on it. I give her 5 points, 5 broad topics. I said, you write this in this structured framework and get over it. She did this, and for me as a leader, it could have been the easiest task. Number one, I'm a published author. I could have done it myself very easily. It would have been barely, 30 minutes. I could have allotted this task to another team member, another very easy, a way out of things. But that would have given a severe hit to the confidence of this person, because she was already, on the verge of telling me that, I want to quit. I'm not going to be able to handle this. I had to coax her into staying. Because for us, cross-sectional teams, for us, diverse teams are not going to work if we are not able to accommodate people's working styles. The example I just reiterated to you was an example of an invisible disability. There are barriers to visible disabilities as well. Infrastructural barriers, accessibility is a conversation that I think all of us here have had. We have misconstrued disability because we are still stuck on the medical model of disability that only focuses on physicality, only focuses on impairment, and boxes people on things that they're unable to do. The conversation of what they're able to do, what they're able to achieve, that is something that we are yet to have. We're beginning this conversation, but yes, as a society, as organizations, we have a long way to go for that conversation to actually bear fruit on ground. When we say that there are policies, there are of course, there are rules, laws, reservations, everything is there. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016, the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act that India ratified in 2007. All of it is there, it's in place, but it's on paper. We're yet to be able to actually build in systems, as Vinita ma'am said, systems, processes, people, teams, and the overall culture of inclusion that actually is using skill sets of these of people with disabilities of this community. Article 21 of the Constitution of India is the right to life. The right to life for every individual, which automatically is party of the fact that people with disabilities also have the right to life, right? It's there. So which makes diversity a fact of human society. But when diversity is a fact of human society, inclusion, on the other hand, is a choice that India, I'm sorry, but is yet to make that choice. India is yet to choose inclusion. And I can assure you, as a woman with disability rather, who has worked in a lot of organizations, who has interned with the United Nations as well, and who has led a team of 75 volunteers, I can assure you inclusion is not difficult. We need to start hearing people speak their realities. We need to encourage people speak their realities, because what we are actually calling reasonable accommodations in India right now is a person's basic right in another country. And if they have done it, yes, we are a developing nation, I can second to that, but we will be able to do it, because I can bet on the fact that we have people who exercise empathy, who exercise inclusion, and nobody wants to practice inclusion, at least on the face of it, in plain sight. They don't want to be exclusionary. For us, why are they struggling? Why are people with disabilities struggling? Of course, infrastructural barriers, everybody knows that. Accessibility conversations we have had. We are talking about making buildings accessible, making government offices accessible, making lifts, ramps. All these things are part of buildings today, yes. But accessibility is not where inclusion will begin. Again, taking from what Vinita Mittal ma'am said, inclusion is where it's going to have to begin, and inclusion begins in your mind. Inclusion begins in your thought process. It begins in the fact that you hire a person because they are skilled. You hire a lead because they know how to lead a team. Not because, you have a lift and ramp. That's not how inclusion is actually going to work. And for me, I think some of the most basic practices that organizations could do, are doing rather, some of the best practices as we call them. We would see a lot, yes, physical and accessibility is improving for people with locomotor disabilities. Disability is a huge term, and it's a huge human resource that we have not been able to tap into, the potential that we are missing out as a society. Braille material, the lack of braille material, the lack of lighted paths, the lack of sign language. If this country's constitution can recognize 21 languages as official Indian languages, why are we not giving sign language training to people? At least the most basic of the ISL training should be mandated in offices across the nation. And of course, for us, nobody is perfect. It's such a huge spectrum that to transpose one's needs to another is going to be a mistake that will again is likely to go into the wrong direction. All we need to, one of my final remarks would be, all we need to be able to integrate people with disabilities in the real world, in offices, in politics, and in the sphere of education, as we do at Enable Education, is a little bit of understanding, lot of empathy, and a listening ear is all that we need. Us at Enable Education, yes, we do largely work for children with disabilities, but we developed a comprehensive comic book that we have designed, and we have done stories that are largely directed towards children and educators to help them understand inclusion for children with disabilities, for educators, children, and peers. But for me, but if I were to tell you about it, yes, if you were to pick up that book and read it through, it'll barely take you about 15 minutes. You will be able to understand the basic nuances of inclusion, because it is really, really not that difficult. Understanding inclusion is very easy. It's, again, over and over again, empathy. And when you build empathy, you do build companies, organizations, institutions that are inclusive, that are disability friendly, and that are most importantly, disability affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Aarushi. And to do the honors, I would request Ms. Bhavna Batra, VP People, SNP Global. Can we have a huge round of applause for Ms. Bhavna Batra?